Hey everybody, Nick here, and in this video I'm going to show you how to service your first automation client in 2024. I'm going to build out a flow live in front of you, and then we're going to talk about how to maximize the quality and the value of every customer that you get from here on out. Let's get into it. So first things first, this is just my own process that got me to $72K a month with my automation agency. It is not the only way. There are a variety of methods, plans, and systems. Take whatever makes sense to you out of this video and then discard whatever isn't relevant. And ultimately, no gatekeeping. I'm going to show you everything. Plus, I'll give you the whole system that you could sell, plus the whimsical at the end of this video. And it's going to be basically one of the most valuable things that I think that I've given for free on YouTube to date. So let's talk about where you are right now. You got your first client. You've labored for maybe days, weeks, or months on cold email or communities or Upwork or Fiverr or referrals through a friend, whatever your sales method has been, you finally got a client. Well, I got great news for you and I got shitty news for you. The first is that getting a client is definitely hard, but keeping a client is harder. And it's in the keeping of the client that you get to generate multiples on your time. And it's really in the retention that this industry becomes as profitable and as high leverage as it is. The unfortunate thing about any service model is that there are hundreds of things that can go wrong during the fulfillment stage. Luckily, I have made the vast majority of these mistakes, and after dozens of projects, I built a pretty simple flow, which I find eliminates 95% of all the problems that most people eventually face, just upfront. Essentially, you can kind of think about this as it's like a treatment that inoculates you against most of the BS. And if you guys can take that away from this video, you're going to save yourself a lot of time, energy, and suffering. Suffering that I and other people that didn't have roadmaps had to go through to get here. So I'm going to build it out with you live in a minute. I'm going to give you the template afterwards. And I want you to know that this process, I can personally guarantee that it works from $0 all the way up to $72,000 a month. I haven't tested it further with the automation agency, but my suspicion is it's very scalable. It'll work all the way up to more than $1 million a month, just because of how much it inoculates against these very common agency problems. So just before I get into that, I wanted to cover what your job is as a service provider. And, I hate to break it to you, but your job in running an automation agency is not just the building of the systems. Most people think that your job starts the second that you sign the deal, shake hands, and then make a little bit of money. But in reality, your job actually started the second that you made initial contact with the prospect. And the way that we know this is just think about it for a second. You doing sales is still work, right? You doing marketing is still work. You messaging people, all of that is stuff that you would still probably consider work, right? If you were to bill $500 an hour to do a 4-hour project, you might think, my hourly rate on that's $500 an hour. I made $2,000 in 4 hours. That's sick. Well, in reality, if you also spent 4 hours to acquire that client, your hourly rate for that job is not $500 an hour. You did not make $2,000 in 4 hours. You made $2,000 in 8 hours, aka you made $250. And that's what a lot of the freelance and agency world doesn't really deeply understand about the money that they're making. They're like, oh man, I made $1,000 for 30 minutes of work. That's incredible. Well, actually, you didn't make $1,000 for 30 minutes of work. You made $1,000 for however long it took to find that client, however long it took to close that client, however long it took to nurture that client, whatever you had to do, plus the time it took you to do the job. So the reason I bring up that analogy is because I think it's a little more straightforward to understand than what I'm about to tell you. But it's the exact same thing, same conceptual thing once you get the job. If you were to price a project at $2,000, right? And then it took you an hour to put the project together, all the little bits and pieces. But then it took you another 9 hours to talk to your client, give them updates, do revision requests, ask them for materials every other week, so on and so on. Then I'm sorry to break it to you, but the $2,000 that you made, you did not make in an hour, you made it over 10 hours. So your hourly rate is not $2K, it's $200. And the two are very different. So I'm bringing this up because I want to illustrate that the important thing in the business is not just optimizing the work that you do. It's not just the templates and stuff, although it certainly helps. It's optimizing everything around the work that you do. And this is really business infrastructure talk. This is really a systematic framework that's going to work for any type of agency, not just an automation agency. And that's why I think it's so high leverage. So what I'm going to do next is we're actually going to build out the flow in Whimsical together, which is a flowchart software. And I'm just going to walk you through this whole thing from end to end. I'm also going to show you 3 templated resources that I have for you. I've created a list of templated project update emails for you guys. And so we have, I don't know, like maybe 5 or 6 or something like that. I've created a project delivery template for you, which we're going to talk about. I've also created a kickoff call SOP. And if you guys have already downloaded this from one of my older videos, I've gone through and I've provided much, much more detail here, so that I basically give you almost like a script that you can go through during both of these processes to maximize the quality of every lead. Okay, so how do we actually go about, how do we go about servicing a client once we've won them? Well, it's reasonably straightforward. And I'm just going to make sure that you guys can see what's on my screen here, because I know technically my face is in the bottom right-hand corner. And in previous videos, I've sort of covered stuff up inadvertently. So let me just make sure that everything's good here. Okay, so first things first, the project, once you win the project, right, you winning the project starts after you change the hands, right? That's sort of like the win condition. If money does not change hands, then you haven't really won the project yet. So if somebody's verbally agreed to you and said, hey, this sounds great, I'd love to do this, hell yeah, you closed the deal, man, high five. That doesn't actually mean shit. The only thing that matters is when you have some type of money in your bank account. If you're on a platform sales like Upwork or Fiverr, this is a little bit different because some of these platforms have escrow features where like Fiverr or Upwork will hold the money for you until you do your part of the job. That's okay. That you can still consider that as winning a deal. But really the thing that you should be looking for is some type of either upfront deposit or the full payment amount, essentially. So what happens after money changes hands, you win the project? Well, you need to host a kickoff call. A kickoff call, as I mentioned before, is basically just a brief little call that you have. Doesn't have to be more than 15 or 20 minutes, but it's where you do all of the work at the front of the project to inoculate yourself against all of the future BS that commonly comes up. And what do you do in a kickoff call? Well, there are a bunch of things. The first is that you discuss your timelines with the prospect, or I guess they're a client at this point. So you're going to discuss, hey, I'm going to have X for you by Y date. Hey, I'm going to do this job by this milestone. This is how quickly we're going to finish the project. This is when you can expect to be able to use it and that sort of thing. The next is you're going to define your availability. This is something that I never used to do, but ever since I started doing it, I get like 90% fewer problems. Availability in this case means if a client wants to reach you for whatever reason, maybe there's some emergency in their system, maybe they need some maintenance, maybe there's some just random one-off questions, when can they do so? If they were to send you just a random email or text message and then you didn't get back to them for 48 hours because you were, I don't know, on a boat with your girlfriend or something like that, sailing away, they're probably going to be a little bit, piffed at you, right? And likewise, you're probably going to be a little bit tiffed at them for thinking, well, shit, man, it was my vacation. Well, the reason why is because you didn't talk about it with them. They don't know your availability. And so you can't be a mind reader and you can't expect your client to be a mind reader. The simplest way I found to inoculate against all this is to give them an availability window, which is basically like a hour or 2 hour slot per day that you can be reached. What I will usually do, and I'll show you guys in the kickoff call SOP, but what I'll usually do is I'll give them a 2 hour window between 10 a.m. and 12 p.m. my time. And I'll say, hey, if you have any questions, I can get back to you within 15 minutes if you send me a message on Slack within that time period. I'll do my best to respond outside of that time period, but I can't really guarantee it. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about our expectations with the client. We're going to figure out what they need from us. We're going to see if there's anything that maybe they're under the impression that we're going to provide that we are not going to provide. We're going to see if maybe there's some impressions that we have on their responsibilities that they don't understand. And the reason why, again, is because you just eliminate most of the bullshit involved in service management if you just talk about this stuff up front. You can kind of think about it like a relationship. If you, I don't know, your spouse or your partner or something like that does something that you don't like, and then you don't respond to them right away, you just say, man, I really didn't like that. Then it starts bouncing around in your noggin. And, 6 months, a year later, after bounced around in your brain for the last year, you're fuming and, you get really angry. And the reason why this has become an issue is just because you haven't talked about it with the person that you have this sort of relationship with. And business relationships are no different. If you just talk about what to expect, and if you just get all of that heavy lifting done the moment that you start something with them, your life's going to be a lot easier moving forward. The next thing to talk about is you need to get your clients to sign up to platforms. And I personally do all of this live. So I get them to sign up to all the platforms that they need live, specifically because it takes care of all my 2-factor authentication stuff, takes care of any last minute questions. It ensures they always sign up to the right package. It basically ensures that there is no back and forth once this step is done. After the kickoff call, I literally have everything I need to just finish the project and hand it off to them, right? It's done. The vast majority of automation projects that I did when I started, I had like 50% of the information. So then I had to slowly ask them for more info over time and be like, hey, the last thing I need is this. Shit, the actual last thing I need is this. And it provides a very unprofessional sort of approach. And customers can kind of sniff out that you're inexperienced when you do stuff like that. The next thing I'm going to do here, and the reason why I'm moving this around the way that I am, you'll see in a second. But the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to walk them through any issues or any problems that I foresee with the scope of the project. Usually there's no real issue or problem, but if there is an issue that I foresee, like, hey, listen, one thing that might happen is XYZ could occur, I like to get ahead of it. The reason why is because if the problem does occur, well, you've gotten ahead of it and the client's going to think that you're conscientious and they're going to appreciate you having brought it up. And then if the problem doesn't occur, well, then you are going to seem even better because you told the client that there could be a problem and the problem didn't occur. So sort of the situation is even better than expected. Either way, it's a win for you. An example of this might be you're building some sort of system that requires a specific platform and maybe their webhooks are shoddy or they don't send consistent data or something. So you say, hey, listen, one problem that may occur is that we may not get consistent data from this webhook. There are a couple of workarounds that I'm going to build for you if that doesn't work. But I just wanted to let you know that if we do suffer from that problem, this timeline here is going to be a little bit longer. Is that all right? Yeah, of course. Typically, there are no major issues there, and then you just get a bunch of brownie points for bringing it up. And then the last thing that I'll do is add everything to password manager / PM system. Password manager is something like LastPass, OnePass, Dashlane. It's a platform that just allows you to keep track of all your credentials and all your customer credentials. PM system is just, a project management system. Just getting something in either, it doesn't have to be complicated, by the way. It could be like your notes, your Apple Notes app. It could be like Bear. It could be Todoist. It could be just some little piece of paper where you're keeping track of where the client's at. And as you get more complex and as your business grows a little bit more, this project management system starts being shared with a variety of other people. But for now, just make sure you have some type of textual representation of what's going on in the project because you don't want to lose track of anything. Okay, the reason why I did this is because these are sort of like sub-steps of the kickoff call. So I'm just going to make these dash and we'll just make these nice and sexy and purple. This is the main flow. Money changes hands. You host a kickoff call. What's next? Well, you start working on the project. And there's no magic here. I'm not going to be able to really break the actual project down specifically because we're not talking about a specific type of project. Sorry, we're not talking about a specific project. We're just talking about a type of project, which is an automation project. But generally speaking, when you run an automation project, the way that I recommend you do things is you sell systems that you have blueprints for or templates for, systems that you've built either for another client in the past or more likely for yourself if it's your first project. And what I mean by that is you copy blueprints, templates, if it's like a CRM or something, one-click template, to the client's workspace, essentially. Whatever that workspace is. If they got like a Make account, which I'd recommend that they do, you just copy it from your own Make account to theirs. Same thing with Zapier. If it's like Monday CRM, you copy all the board structure and stuff like that from yours to theirs. Essentially, the reason why I template everything out so much is because if I start a completely new project, every single time I work with a new customer, I'm basically building the wheel again from scratch. But the reality is most customers want the same things, just tweaked a little bit differently depending on the project management system that they're using or the CRM. So if you could build 80% of it out in advance, then the distance you have to travel is not 100%, 0% to 100%. It's 80% to 100%, which is, by default 5 times leverage. And sometimes your templates can get a lot better than that. Sometimes they can get 99% of the way there. But obviously, after you make the template, you need to customize the template to the client request. So that's what I mean here. Like if you have a blueprint for a cold email system or something that you were selling, and your blueprint uses instantly, and then the customer wants to use Smart Lead for whatever reason, or maybe they've already paid for a subscription to some other platform, all you have to do is just take the infrastructure there and just replace those modules, hot swap basically the functionality. After you essentially customize the template, what you have done is you have finished the project. So now you just need to deliver, let me just say you complete the project here. Then we'll do the delivery afterwards. Actually, you know what? There's one more step you have to do, and you have to deliver progress updates. So after you've built some of this project out, you need to show the client basically what you've done, and you need to be in constant communication with them in some way, shape, or form. Whether or not you're actually in constant communication with them or you're just providing them the impression, that's actually not that big of a deal. You can schedule a lot of these progress updates in advance if you wanted to be really sneaky and automate the hell out of your own job. You need to deliver some type of progress update, essentially. So what I would do here is instead of doing this manually every time, and I'll show you my templates in a moment. Use templates. Let's make this purple too. That's nice. And then you can send these weekly, you can send these bi-weekly, you can send these monthly if it's a big project, until basically the project is completed. And then after all of this is done, we'll have effectively completed this project. So let me just make a little arrow that goes up here, and then we'll say you complete the project. And then, let's just stop right there and let's run through some of these templates. So I'm just going to drag the update and delivery templates here because we're going to use both of them in a moment. Then I'll drag the kickoff call SOP template down here just so you guys could see what that looks like. And I'm just going to deliver this to you afterwards. But let's run through this flow from top to bottom. Essentially what's going to happen is money's going to change hands. After money changes hands, you're going to book and host a kickoff call. On that kickoff call, you're going to discuss timelines. You're going to define an availability window. You're going to talk about your expectations. Then you're going to get your clients to sign up to these platforms live. You're going to walk them through any issues that you suspect may be occurring or may occur. Then at the end, you're going to add everything to your password manager project management system. If you could do this on the call, even better. That way, the second the call is done, you're good. You're then going to start working on the project. The way to actually work on the project is you're going to copy blueprints and templates and that sort of thing to the client workspace. You're then going to spend a little bit of time customizing the template to the client request. And that's really like your job if you think about it that way. And then while you're doing this and as you're completing the project, you're going to deliver progress updates. But instead of doing this every time manually, like writing out some big long progress update, what we're going to do, and I'm going to give them to you, is we're just going to write like 4 or 5 like email or message templates, and you're just going to copy and paste them basically every single time. Then you're going to send weekly, bi-weekly, or monthly updates, and then you're going to complete the project. All right, now once your project is done, what do we do? Well, you need to test the flow from end to end. E2E testing, I believe, is the terminology in software development. And that just means that you basically have to run through the entire flow, whether it's one scenario, multiple scenarios, 5 different software products, whatever. You just have to make sure that like the input can make it all the way to the output. So don't just test modules independently. Don't just test one scenario at a time. Test the entire thing from start to finish. Yeah, this can take a fair amount. This is, to me, to be honest, usually like the lengthiest part, this actual testing process, because I need to make sure that it works before the client sees it, obviously. But this is the number one most sort of like worth it part to this, right? And the fact that you're using templates here is going to do most of that heavy lifting for you because you'll have tested the templates before, but it's really that customized connection that you're making that's important. After you do this, I would highly recommend you do the following 3 steps. You create a Google document outlining the SOP to use the system. Essentially, create a textual Google document that goes through and shows the client how to build, or rather, how to use the system from end to end, as well as how to make a couple of updates to the system as well. You could just ask GPT-4 or Claude to write a template for you, and then you could go in there and make a couple of changes. I'll show you how to do that in a second. I'll actually ask Claude to do it live for us. But then after you create the Google Doc, you also need to record a video delivering the project from end to end. And so we tested it from end to end here. Well, now we actually have to record a video where we do it again. And then this is really like the juice, because this is what the client sees. This is what's really important for the client. But the last step is you send a templated message with an upsell to your retainer or secondary product or etc. Awesome. That is essentially the whole flow from end to end. If you do this with every project, you're going to go a long way. So let's actually jump into some of these SOPs. I'm going to open up the kickoff call SOP first, and I'll run you through what the actual kickoff call looks like, basically word for word. So I am going to zoom out here just so we can all see this, and just run you through this whole kickoff call SOP. First thing is that this is a detailed kickoff call SOP, standard operating procedure, to help you onboard clients for your automation agency. I use this structure all the time at my own agency, which hit $72K a month. You can create a copy and use it for yourself. The first thing is you need to introduce yourself. So say hi, thank them for joining, that sort of thing. The second thing is you just need to discuss why you're there. And what I usually do is I break this into a problem statement where I just say, hey, listen, the biggest issue in our space is logistics. Have you ever worked with another automation provider before? Yeah. Well, I'm willing to bet that like 2-factor authentication was a pain, password, credentials, all that stuff was a pain, right? They're like, yeah. Okay, awesome. I like to sidestep all this personally by front loading the onboarding call. And after hundreds of projects, I found this to be the most straightforward way. We're just going to do everything together over the course of the next 30 minutes. Okay. All right. So here's my goal. We're going to cover timelines. Then we're going to talk about how to stay in touch with each other, basically like mutual availability. And then I'm going to show you what you can expect at every step of the process by going through the proposal that we drafted at the beginning of our relationship. Then we are together going to sign up to all of the platforms that are listed here. So make.com, smartly.ai, PandaDoc. I've prepared detailed instructions for each that I just shared with you over email a moment ago. And the reason why we're doing this together is so that I can physically be here to walk you through any issues that may arise, and so that we can tackle two-factor authentication together if that ends up being an issue. So if you need a code, or if I need a code to log in, I'll just be able to ask you right now as opposed to try and figure this out at like 9:30 p.m. on a Tuesday. Fair? Okay. If you have any questions before we begin, at the end, we'll have a little Q&A session, and then we can wrap this up. How's that sound? All right, sweet. Then we dive into the timelines, where I basically say, hey, I'm going to start on this date and I'm going to end on this date. If I can deliver the project even earlier or faster, I will. In terms of the milestones, my work's going to be split into the following sections, and then I'll open up the proposal and I'll walk through it with them. Does that work for you? Then I'll talk about availability. I'll say, I know a lot of people don't like talking about availability, but I think it's an incredibly important part of a good working relationship. I personally hate random calls, but I make myself available every day between 10 a.m. and 12 p.m. on Slack. I just put this in as an example time and platform. It's not the only time and platform that you can use. Just edit this to whatever your own project specifications are. What I usually say is, if you have any one-off questions during this period, I'll be able to get back to you within about 15 minutes or so. Otherwise, I'll just give you regular progress updates every whatever days. Does that work for you? You notice I'm asking, does that work for you every time? Because I'm essentially getting the client to verbally say yes to everything that I'm proposing. I want their buy-in. If I don't have their buy-in, then what's the point of this anyway? The next thing we talk about are platforms, where I say, okay, great, let's get you signed up to these platforms. I like doing it all on a call just because it lets me have everything I need by the end of our conversation. It also sidesteps 2FA issues like I talked about, which are big in the automation space. You'll know what I mean if you've ever worked with somebody else before. Here's a quick guide that I have on how to sign up to Instantly, how to sign up to Smartly, how to sign up to PandaDoc. I just sent it over to you. Do you mind giving it a click and letting me know if you see it all right? Yeah? Okay, sweet. Well, let's start with the first platform on that list. How about Instantly? And then they say, awesome. Thanks so much for your time. Do you have any questions for me before we wrap up? If there's like a Q&A period, that's when we do it right now. Last but not least, all right, I will give you your first update on this date guaranteed. Looking forward to working with you. You're going to receive an email from me. Thanks so much. If you follow a process like this, whatever your business is, whether it's an automation agency, whether it's a marketing agency, whether it's some type of, I don't know, like service fulfillment thing, you're going to do extraordinarily well. Just because this is way more professional than what most people do. And this structured onboarding or kickoff call also gets all the information you need right then and there without having to muddy up client relationships later by asking them for shit, as I mentioned, on 9:30 p.m. on a Tuesday. So that's the kickoff call SOP. Let's cover the project update and delivery templates. Essentially, what I've done here is I've templated out a bunch of progress update emails. I've just gone through my own emails with clients, and then I just anonymized most of the information and made a couple of changes to make them even better than what they were. If you're sending these over a messaging platform instead, like Slack or Teams, I'd actually encourage you guys to use Slack or Teams versus email. I find I just personally get all my shit lost over email, but just remove the signature portion at the end of this. It's a little bit cleaner. So quick little example one I'm only going to read out too is, hey client, progress update for you. Here's where I'm at. I just wrapped up X. Next up is Y. Everything's great and working exactly as we planned. I'm actually a little bit ahead of schedule. Looking forward to delivering this for you. Thanks. If you send a client one or two of these between the start of the project and the end of the project, their perception or opinion of you is going to be way higher than if you just say, okay, let's get started, and okay, here's the project. There are two reasons for that. The first is that you're obviously prioritizing client communication, which is just important in building relationships, right? If you talk to them more often, they're going to like you more often, generally, if you're good at what you do. But the more important thing is that this will make the project seem more involved. It'll make it seem like it has more extra steps. It'll make it seem like it's more of a big deal. And so they will feel better about having spent $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, $10,000 with you. If you make the project seem bigger and more involved, obviously they're going to think, all right, man, this guy really knows his stuff. I'm really glad that I chose to work with him on this. Wow, this person's really diligent. Geez, yeah. He's finishing those milestones exactly like he said he would. Wow, this project's a lot more involved than just like a few minutes on make.com, eh? That's the point that I'm making, and it's really the value in doing this with a prospect client, at this point. Okay, here's another one. Hey client, just checking in on project. X is on schedule. We just wrapped up this portion and we're going to complete this other portion next week. I even attached a screenshot below. I had a quick question about Z, by the way. Do you know about blah, 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 blah? I hope you're enjoying the week. Thank you. As I mentioned, if you're sending messages, just remove that little signature portion down here at the end, completely unnecessary. But providing these updates and just using all of these templates essentially makes it so that this also doesn't seem like it's a standardized process. It kind of seems incidental. It's like, hey, I had a quick question about Z. By the way, I finished all this stuff here, and here's a quick screenshot. I thought you'd like it. As you see down here, I know I said I'd deliver a progress update for you, but we just wrapped this portion up a little bit early, and I figure I'd collect my brownie points. Or, hey, did you hear about the news the other day? I saw it on my feed and thought about your company. Things are going really swimmingly, etc. The last thing that I have down here is I have a project delivery template, and this is a little bit different than the project update template. The project delivery template is what you give to them when you deliver the project. As I mentioned, there are 2 portions to delivering the project, or 3 really. The first is you're going to obviously give them all the credentials and everything they need. You're going to give them the system, you're going to finish it. But the second is you're going to give them a Google Doc SOP, and then you're going to give them a video SOP as well. So in order to represent that, this project delivery template mentions both. Hey, name, had a blast working on this, just wrapped up your cold email project. I always include documentation alongside every delivery, just so you and your team know how things work. Here's a guide I recorded that shows you how to use the scenario and how to get your leads. And then if you prefer text, I also wrote an in-depth piece of documentation here. So you give them both. This is your chance to score extra points with the customer. And this sort of thing is what gets you the long retentions with clients and essentially allows you to multiply your leverage. Would you mind taking a look at this and letting me know your thoughts? Assuming everything's good to go, I'll send you over an invoice for the remaining balance and we can wrap things up. I always like to refer to and reference the payment. I always like to talk about the payment openly. If you don't talk about the payment openly in a service business, a lot of people like to just pretend everything's all hunky-dory when really there's resentment because you still haven't received payment. Or you might finish the project, deliver everything, and then not mention payment. And in the back of your mind, you're like, where the hell's my fucking payment, right? Why is this guy not addressing the elephant in the room? But then the customer thinks, that's wonderful. What a great job. I'm so happy and everything about the customer. My vendor is amazing. They'd be happy to pay if you just brought it up. So just bring it up. And then down here is where I always use something like this. I always say, P.S. I have a bunch of interesting ideas for you I'd like to share after we're done. I think I could realistically double blank bottleneck with some tweaks. Let me know if you'd like to hear them. So, hey, I think I could realistically double Boardwalk's revenue in the next 6 months with this system. Let me know if you'd like to hear about that. I always like to leave it up to the prospect to decide whether or not they want to hear about it. Who's going to say no to that? Hey, I can double your number of leads per month. Hey, I can double your revenue. Hey, I think I can I think I can double your margin. I can reduce your COGS by 2, or I can cut your COGS in half. The point that I'm making is you're not just forcing them or trying to push them to sign up on some next project or retainer, but you're basically framing this as hey, I have some suggestions for you. Just thought I'd let you know. If you want to hear about them, maybe we can jump on a call. We can talk about it a little bit more further. And I find that this personally is the best way to frame a retainer style relationship. And this is sort of how you slide yourself organically into a long-term relationship with that client. Slide right in those DMs. So yeah, that is the whimsical here with those 3 templated assets. What I'm going to do is I'm going to copy all of this, and then I'll share this in the video description link just so you have the whimsical, and then you can just access the docs directly through said whimsical. If you guys follow this structure and this format, you're going to do really well. And it doesn't matter if it's a creative agency, if it's a PPC company, or if it's an automation agency. This is just general service industry infrastructure that just does awesome. So yeah, in closing, do not rebuild the wheel. Use templates to do both the project and then to even communicate with the customer so that you only have to do things once and then you can just take advantage of the work that you've done in the past. The second thing is don't just build for your customer, but service them. Your job as a service provider is exactly that. It's the servicing part. It's not necessarily just providing the building. It's everything around the building. And if you can build, great. But if you can't run the rest of your business great, you'll never really be able to progress. You're never really going to be able to make a lot of money. That's very much a 9-to-5 corporate job sort of mindset. That's not an entrepreneurial mindset. If you're an entrepreneur, you really do need to own the entire stack. And that involves the sales, the marketing, that involves the service fulfillment, that involves the retention, the follow-ups, everything. Last thing I'll mention is the skills that I'm talking about here. They apply to every industry, not just automation. So if you learn them once, these will benefit you basically forever. I really hope you guys appreciated this video. I had a lot of fun putting it together. If you guys have any comments or questions about this, just leave them down below. Otherwise, if you could do me a hefty favor and like and subscribe to my channel, that'd mean a lot. Thanks so much for watching. Have a great rest of the day. See you in the next one. Bye-bye.